Join us on Patreon and become part of our journey to uncover history's untold stories. Your support helps us create in-depth content, bring hidden narratives to life, and keep history alive for everyone.
In the highlands of East Africa, cloaked in mists of ancient mystery and guarded by time-honored monks in ivory-painted monasteries, a different version of heaven's greatest war has survived untouched by Western doctrine. Far away from the Roman halls of the Vatican and the council chambers of Nicaea, Ethiopia, the solitary mountain kingdom that preserved its Christian tradition independent of European influence, has quietly kept its own profound and ancient telling of what really happened in heaven before man walked the earth. What emerges from their sacred scrolls and oral traditions is not merely a retelling of Lucifer's rebellion, but a cosmic saga involving ancient hierarchies, hidden motives, divine secrets, and a spiritual conflict that transcends the boundaries of theology and history alike. This version of the war in heaven, preserved in the Kebra Nagast, the Book of the Glory of Kings, and the fragments of the Book of Enoch, still part of Ethiopia's biblical canon, is more than myth. It is an ancestral memory, encoded in liturgy, art, and scripture. According to the Ethiopian Orthodox Church, the battle between the angelic forces of good and evil was not simply a matter of prideful rebellion, as portrayed in European texts, but a test of loyalty to a divine mystery, one that involved the revelation of a future creation humanity. Ethiopian tradition claims that before the material world was formed, God convened the angels and revealed to them his plan to create man in his own image. It was then that the angel Satanael, once called the bearer of light, rebelled, not out of pride alone, but out of disdain for the idea that a being of clay and breath would be exalted above him. While Western Christianity teaches that Lucifer's downfall was rooted solely in hubris, the Ethiopian version introduces a more layered conflict. Satanael's war against God was also a philosophical revolt against the divine design, a refusal to accept that frail humanity could one day sit above the stars and judge angels. The Kebra Nagast, written in Guizi sometime around the 14th century, but believed to contain much older oral traditions, elaborates on this divine confrontation. According to the text, when God revealed to the angels that man would be created in his image, some angels rejoiced while others were disturbed. Satanael was foremost among the disturbed, saying, "Why should a being of dust be exalted above me, who is made of fire and light?" He then gathered others who agreed with his logic, convincing a third of the heavenly host to follow him. But this rebellion was not seen merely as a coup. It was a betrayal of divine trust, and more critically, a denial of love, for it rejected God's will for communion with his creation. The battle that followed was not only fought with might, but with words, oaths, and divine authority. The Archangel Michael, who in the Ethiopian tradition is considered the foremost warrior of the Lord, stood against Satanael, not simply as a soldier, but as the enforcer of divine order. Here, Michael was not just a sword-wielding figure, but a defender of divine intention, one who understood the long-term plan of humanity's rise and the role of humility in true greatness. The Ethiopian tradition sees Michael as the eternal protector of Israel, of the righteous, and of the human soul, constantly guarding against the forces of pride and rebellion, both external and internal. What makes the Ethiopian version especially striking is its use of the Book of Enoch, a text banned and forgotten in Western canons but revered in Ethiopia. In it, the story of the Watchers, a group of angels who descended to earth and mated with human women, adds a second layer to the war in heaven. These angels, too, fell, not because of outright rebellion, but because of desire, curiosity, and defiance of divine boundaries. In this way, the Ethiopian perspective paints the heavens not as static, but as realms of decision, emotion, and accountability. The war was not a single event, but a series of tests, a celestial drama echoing human struggles of free will, obedience, and purpose. The spiritual war also carried consequences for Earth. Ethiopian texts suggest that the fallen ones, be they Satanael's warriors or the Watchers, continued their work among humanity, sowing division, perversion, and chaos. In particular, the Book of Jubilees, another text preserved in Ethiopia, expands on how these spirits corrupted humanity's knowledge, teaching forbidden sciences, warcraft, and sorcery. Thus, the cosmic battle reverberated downward, manifesting in the kingdoms of men, influencing empires, and ultimately preparing the world for the incarnation of Christ. Seen not only as a redeemer of man, but as the divine warrior who would finish the war begun in heaven. The Ethiopian Church's teachings assert that the cross of Christ was not merely a Roman instrument of torture, but a weapon, the very device through which the rebellion was crushed and divine order restored. In the Ethiopian liturgical calendar, many of the great feast days are not centered around Roman saints or theological debates, but around the triumphs of Michael, the mysteries of Enoch, the glory of the Ark, and the sovereignty of the Trinity against the ancient rebellion. Every year on Mascarum 12, September 21st, the Ethiopian Church celebrates the feast of the Archangel Michael, symbolizing his victory in the celestial war and his continued guardianship over earth. What also sets Ethiopia's version apart is its seamless blend of myth and monarchy. The kings of Ethiopia, especially the Solomonic dynasty, viewed themselves not just as political leaders, but as living extensions of this divine narrative. By claiming descent from King Solomon and the Queen of Sheba, they linked themselves to the wisdom of Israel and the spiritual line of David. Thus, for centuries, Ethiopian emperors ruled not just with scepters but with scrolls, believing their throne was part of a holy resistance against the chaos unleashed by the ancient rebellion. The Kebra Nagast even proclaims that the Ark of the Covenant, brought to Ethiopia by Menelik, son of Solomon and Sheba, is a divine relic that protects the world from the fallout of that first war in heaven. What emerges from Ethiopia's scriptures is not just an alternative version of events. It is a parallel cosmology, rich in mysticism, justice, and spiritual warfare. It is a world where angels are not silent statues but passionate beings of thought, where rebellion is not simplistic evil but tragic arrogance, and where humans are not afterthoughts but the centerpiece of God's design. It is a vision of heaven that demands more than belief. It demands participation, humility, and courage. As modern scholars and theologians slowly re-examine suppressed and forgotten books, the Ethiopian version of the war in heaven stands not as a relic, but as a living narrative, still whispered by monks at Lake Tana, still read in the chanting halls of Lalibela, still etched in the sacred margins of illuminated manuscripts guarded for centuries. It reminds us that history is not just written by the victors, it is often guarded by the faithful. And in the hidden corners of ancient Ethiopia, one of the oldest and most profound tellings of the cosmic war still burns, waiting to awaken the world.